Hello there. Welcome back to this another installment in the Anatomy and Physiology series. Today we are going to be talking about the endocrine system. And so this will be part one of a two-part series. There's quite a bit to cover, so let's go ahead, dive in, and get ready. Okay, so as always, if I could please ask you before we get started to go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me and I really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get that out of the way and get started exploring the endocrine system. So, the endocrine system. There are endocrine glands. That is primarily what makes up the system is glands. Glands, of course, are organs that make up the system. There are several of them. They secrete hormones into the blood. They're pretty much scattered throughout the body, so there's not necessarily like one specific area you could say is endocrine system and one that's not. But those hormones that get secreted by the various glands only affect certain cells or certain other glands. So they have kind of a lock and key mechanism to them where if the hormone fits the receptor site in the cell or the gland, then there'll be an effect. Something will happen. If not, then there's just no reaction and the hormone moves on in search of its lock and key. Specific cells that do accept these locks and keys are called target tissues. There are 8 major endocrine glands in the body. Um, this one actually shows a few more, but we're going to go ahead and talk about the 8 major ones. So you have the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, which is more of a controlling system, the pituitary gland. All 3 of these are located in the brain. You have the parathyroid, the thyroid, the thymus, all located in the neck and chest area. The adrenal glands and the pancreas. The adrenal glands are located on top of the kidneys. The kidneys are not part of the endocrine system. They are just here for reference as to where the adrenal glands are. The pancreas sits right here. So middle of the body, trunk area. And then you have the gonads, which for females are the ovaries and for males are the testes. So let's get started with the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland's probably, if you had to categorize, it's kind of the heavy hitter in the endocrine system. It is a small pea-sized gland um, located in the brain. It is attached to the hypothalamus. And there are 2 regions. There is the anterior pituitary or the front side, also known as the adenohypophysis. And then there's the posterior pituitary or the backside, also known as the neurohypophysis. So you have basically the anterior here and the posterior here. So hormones that get secreted from the pituitary gland are as follows, and the anterior secretes far more than the posterior does. The anterior secretes growth hormone, or GH, thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, gonadotropic hormones, which are follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, or luteinizing hormone, LH, and then prolactin, PRL. The posterior only, only, right, secretes antidiuretic hormone, ADH, and oxytocin. So let's go through each of these. So growth hormone does exactly what you think it does. It stimulates growth. Its target tissues are bones, muscles, and certain organs that have to grow. So too little GH in a child can result in what they call pituitary dwarfism. And pituitary dwarfism is a little different in other types of dwarfism in that um, the person is small in stature, so short. However, all of their body parts are in proportion to one another. Whereas in other certain types of dwarfism, you'll see where the person has maybe a average size trunk but short limbs. In pituitary dwarfism, everything is as it should be as far as proportionate. It's just the person is very, very short. Too much growth hormone in a child can result, of course, in an exceptionally tall individual. If there's excess growth hormone being secreted after growth stops, so after a child is done growing, so more so into the adult side of things, this can cause enlargement in the diameter of the bones, which results in what we call acromegaly. And acromegaly can be seen in many actually famous people. Um, there's been some wrestlers that had acromegaly. The gentleman who I think still holds the world record for being the tallest individual ever, he was in the Guinness Book of World Records back in the early 1900s, maybe 1920s. He had acromegaly. Okay. Most people with acromegaly don't live very long, primarily because everything just keeps getting bigger, and it's very hard to maintain that after a while. All right, next we have thyroid stimulating hormone, and we'll talk about then the thyroid gland because, you know, one affects the other. So, thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, actually stimulates the thyroid gland to secrete thyroid hormone. So, unlike GH that just stimulates some part to do something, this actually stimulates another gland to secrete yet more hormones. Okay. So if there is too much TSH being secreted, which is hypersecretion, right? So too much, this can enlarge the thyroid gland and cause the thyroid gland to secrete too many thyroid hormones. If there's not enough TSH being secreted, then this can cause the thyroid gland to atrophy or get smaller, shrink, and that would cause it then the opposite problem. It would secrete too little hormone. The thyroid gland is situated right in the front of the neck and is connected by this narrow band of tissue in the center called the isthmus. And then these on the side are the lobes. I think it looks like an upside down PlayStation controller myself, but um, some people, some books, literature refers to it as like a butterfly or an H. I think it looks like a PlayStation controller, but that's me. Thyroid hormone. So the TSH stimulates the thyroid. The thyroid then secretes hormones of its own. And thyroid hormone is 95% thyroxine and 5% triiodothyronine. That one. Yeah, I can't say it. Um, this particular hormone, this mixture of hormones, requires iodine to be produced or to make, so to speak. Anytime you see the word synthesis, it's like to make something. Um, if the person has an iodine deficiency, that can result in insufficient amount of hormone. So what happens then is if there's an insufficient amount of hormone, the thyroid tries to make more and it starts to enlarge because it's trying to make more. And this can actually result in what is called a goiter. And a goiter can actually be seen on the neck. It's like a big lump. They generally will refer to it as an iodine deficient goiter. Um, these hormones are important because they help to regulate metabolism and they affect most of the cells in the body because most of our cells metabolize. They affect most of the cells in the body, so there's really no specific target organ or cell. Another hormone that is secreted by the thyroid gland is called calcitonin. Calcitonin is its job is to reduce the levels of calcium in the blood. So what happens is in response to too high levels of calcium in the blood, calcitonin gets released and it reduces the rate that the bones release calcium. It increases the rate that calcium gets excreted by the kidneys so it can be gone, so the levels can lower. And it reduces calcium absorption in the intestines. So again, it kind of allows for the calcium to um, exit the body versus holding on to it to help those levels lower. Um, if there's an over or under production, certain things can happen with the thyroid hormones. So hypo meaning under or too little. Thyroidism means there's too little of the hormone. In children, this can cause what's called cretinism. And in adults, and on an extreme level, it's called myxedema. The treatment for this is hormone therapy. So if they're not producing enough, we have man-made synthetic hormones that can be taken in a pill form, and boom, you're good. Okay, hopefully. Hyperthyroidism, on the other hand, hyper meaning above or excessive, means there's too much hormone being secreted, and this can, as we had mentioned, enlarge the thyroid. It can also cause what's called exophthalmos, which is a bulging of the eyes. And the treatment for this, because you can't take away, obviously, hormone, is to remove or cause the destruction of part of the gland so that the production will kind of hopefully slow down. There are also four smaller little masses that are located on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland, and they are called the parathyroid glands. Um, these secrete, go figure, parathyroid hormone, PTH, in response to low levels of calcium. So they kind of do the opposite of calcitonin in that calcitonin gets released when the levels are too high to bring the levels down. PTH gets released when the levels are too low to try and up the levels of calcium in the blood. It does this by increasing the activity in the bones, so causing the release of more calcium. Increases the reabsorption of calcium into the kidney so it's not lost in the urine. Increases the absorption of calcium in the intestines, which we also need vitamin D in order for this to occur, because vitamin D helps calcium to absorb, especially in the intestines. So basically, it opposes the effect of calcitonin. If there are deficiencies or overabundance of this, then you have hypo, under, parathyroidism, which means there's too little of the hormone being secreted. So this can actually cause nerve issues, where nerves become more excitable, so twitching and stuff like that. Um, Hyperparathyroidism means there's too much of the hormone, and so excess calcium can accumulate in abnormal locations, and this is where we sometimes see kidney stone formation. All right, next on to the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are located, kind of sit on top of the upper portion of the kidneys, so there's one for each kidney. They are divided into two areas, like many of our things, of our organs that we have, are glands. There's a cortex and a medulla, the cortex being the outer region, the medulla being the inner. The cortex secretes Three different cortisone, or I'm sorry, not cortisone, corticoid, which are steroid based hormones. One is the mineralocorticoid. There's the glucocorticoids and the gonadotropins. The way I have always remembered this and the way I've always taught students to remember this is you have salt, sugar, sex. Okay. The mineralocorticoids that are released are called aldosterone. Aldosterone helps to regulate blood volume and helps to conserve sodium ions and water. So, um, as a general biological law, so to speak, wherever salt goes, so sodium, water follows. Okay. So if your body's able to conserve sodium, it's going to conserve water. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. If you have too much sodium, you're going to conserve or retain, excuse me, too much water, and then you're going to have edema or swelling. So aldosterone helps to do this, hopefully just to the correct levels. Glucocorticoids, or the sugar part, is cortisol. Cortisol increases blood glucose levels, so it's helpful like in between meals, so you don't crash out in between meals. It also helps to reduce inflammation. Gonadotropins are sex hormones, so androgens for males, estrogens for females. So again, salt, sugar, sex. Excuse me. The medulla, or the inner part of the adrenal gland, produces epinephrine and norepinephrine. Norepinephrine and epinephrine prepare the body for strenuous activity. Sometimes they call these the flight or fight hormones. They do this by increasing the heart rate, increasing respirations, and increasing blood to the muscles, so the muscles are ready to go. All right, so that is part one of the endocrine system. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for part two, and we will see you soon. Take care.